specific message to South Africa, and do you believe that the country and its government is currently living up to the values that Nelson Mandela stood for in terms of governance and all the other issues?
Africa. Mr. Gates, you spoke about Professor Thomas Piketty's views on South Africa and it being the most unequal country in the world. What do you think we can do to resolve this?
Enzo for the Italian paper La Stampa. My question is, in Europe there is a general fear that in the so-called third industrial revolution, robots and androids in some way are replacing human roles in different industries. And for this reason, European Parliament a couple of weeks ago started to debate to introduce a tax on that to reduce the economic damages. Do you believe that this could be a wise choice? And do you think that there is, in these days, a struggle to let coexist human and artificial intelligence?
To start with the first question, there's no doubt there's been huge progress in South Africa. I don't think any country is fully at the what its founders would have dreamed of. I mean, the U.S. education system, U.S. poverty. There's so many ways that even countries that are extremely well off can do better. There's no doubt in areas like health, education, quality of governance. South Africa has opportunities to do better, but I'm not an expert on that. Our foundation is here involved in the areas that we specialize in. So we're working a lot on the HIV epidemic, the T epidemic, and the rest of my time in South Africa mostly will be focused not only around the AIDS conference, but with lots of meetings with our research partners and delivery partners to understand how we can help there be even better progress on these health issues, particularly in this country, the focus on HIV and TB. Let's see, the second question was...
Professor Piketty.
Oh, Piketty, good old Piketty. Well, there's always a question of how do you uplift people, and the number one agent for uplifting people is the quality of the education system. And, so people have to look in this country, I'm not an expert again on it, but is the quality of education, starting with primary and then secondary and then tertiary, is it able to embrace in a high quality way the entire citizenship? Certainly there are great universities here, but how you make more people qualified for those, expand the capacities is a huge challenge for the country to achieve its potential. The other way that you create equality is through taxation systems, and you've got to uplift enough people to the middle class so there's a large base of people that the taxation can work. But I don't know any specifics about South African current taxation structure. I did, on my Gates notes, I have a lot of comments about the Piketty book. Well, a lot of things that he and I agree about, some things we disagree about. I do think what he said in broadly was very stimulating and got people looking at issues like wealth and income over time. Final question in terms of computers and robots. Today they are entirely a positive force at making things more productive. And you can even think of the automation of farming and then factories as the beginning of the robotics revolution. We talk to them about robotics because their ability to see and listen will be a lot better. Over time, decades from now, they may allow us to free up labor, and they may challenge government income policies, but we're nowhere near at that stage. And obviously, as you get towards that stage, things like taxing the robots themselves will be amongst the ways that you'll look at raising revenue. Even when electricity was first invented, before they understood what it was, somebody said, oh, well, that's good. Once we figure it out, we'll tax it. So, cell phones, computers, robots, it's a source of productivity, and governments have to adjust, and if this comes rapidly, it will be a big challenge to governments.
Next round.
My name is John Muchangi from Kenya. My question is on you made an announcement of $5 billion investment for the next 5 years. So what are going to be the key areas of this investment? Thank you.
What do you believe are the greatest threats to humanity?
Morning to Mr. Gates and your team. It's Kaya here from Kaya from News. I just want to know, I mean, quite a lot of people have received your lecture quite enthusiastically. So what do you make of that? And just going forward, in terms of making sure that some of the ideals that you spoke about are really just implemented, will you perhaps in a way assist with your wisdom? Thank you.
All right, so in terms of the foundation investments, we continue to spend the majority of our money on health-related issues. And so being expert in tuberculosis, HIV, diarrhea, pneumonia, all the things that affect kids under the age of 5. Malnutrition is a huge area of increased investment for us. How people run primary health care facilities and make those very effective at reaching everyone in their countries. And so of the $5 billion that we'll spend in Africa over the next 5 years, over 2/3 of that will be related to those health initiatives. We are in some other areas of importance. I touched in the lecture on agriculture. We fund a lot of research in making better seeds, how we educate farmers, how we get better soil understanding, better credit to farmers. So that would be, after all the health areas as a whole, agricultural would be the second. I also touched on digital financial inclusion. That's an area we invest a lot to get the regulations so that the low-cost fees and the flexibility of a digital financial platform becomes available throughout Africa. As was said, there's a few places like Kenya that are perhaps halfway there, but most of the continent, we're just at the beginning. Another area is sanitation that we have some new approaches, and so we're working with a lot of communities on that. So we'll be expanding in the areas that we have deep expertise and already have partnerships. Second, in terms of threats, the basic trend in terms of health, literacy, are all quite positive. And so how do we accelerate those things? Using technology, better visibility, better governance. There's a few things that are negative. Certainly when the HIV epidemic came along, that was a negative development. We still have an immense amount of work to do on that, and I'll be quite frank about the challenges ahead on that as I give my keynote in Durban a couple days from now and talk about the numbers and where that's going. So that's certainly a threat that we've got to get on top of that because we have more young people who are at risk of being infected. Epidemics in general, like Ebola and Zika, something there could come along. So making sure both technologically in terms of our primary healthcare systems, we're a lot stronger than we proved to be in the 3 countries that were most affected by Ebola. That was a real wake-up call. There are issues about terrorists using weapons of mass destruction that certainly could be a threat. I'm not predicting that, but it's something that we have to be aware of. Overall, I'm very optimistic about the direction things are going and the opportunity to actually accelerate that. And part of the reason I'm so enthused is I've seen so many of the foundation programs have such incredible success. Just the fact we've cut child to death in half, the newspaper doesn't know what day to run that headline, but that's 6 million lives a year globally that every single year are saved, and of course a lot of kids who are far more healthier. So overall, I'm an optimist. On the last point about the lecture being received, well, I don't know. I hope it was. I mean, it was certainly a very polite audience. Maybe it just shows how polite they are. But I was very thrilled to get the invitation. Our foundation's work has brought my wife and I to Africa several times a year, and we have a lot of great partners here. We do a lot here in South Africa itself. The various universities have been great partners to solve the great mysteries of disease, including HIV and tuberculosis. I was lucky to get to know Nelson Mandela and have an opportunity to talk back about the lessons I got from his work and what maybe that should mean for all of us. So, I enjoyed giving the lecture a great deal.
Good evening, Mr. Gates. My name is Yana Yono. I'm from Reuters News. In South Africa currently right now, we've got an outrage of a phenomenon called the blessings, where young women become victims to all the men providing them with money because of poverty and everything else that is happening. Well, I will not narrow it down to my province. It's a South African phenomenon. It is happening. It's a reality. How do you think maybe your country can cooperate with our country in creating programs that can empower young women not to become victims of such things? Because I believe that it also contributes to the spreading of HIV and AIDS in our country.
My name is Lindsay. I'm from Quartz.com. Mr. Gates, you mentioned that cooperation is key to encouraging innovation on the continent. With the Foundation's experience internationally, working across borders, do you have any suggestions on how African countries can work together despite local laws, despite differing political backgrounds, even languages?
Bretsallafrica.com. I was very happy to hear you speak about agriculture, and you mentioned 2 points, soil fertility, and you also said the same is not good enough. Now, considering the amount of support you give to agri and agricultural development on the continent, isn't large-scale monoculture and input-intensive farming part of the same that is not good enough? Thank you.
Okay, on the first point, there's no doubt that young women and communities, face incredible challenges, and that's partly why, we see that more HIV infections, over 60% are young women, and even starting at the age of 15 or so, quite a bit higher than their male equivalents. Really, South Africa is I think the official designation is a middle-income country, and so it's not nearly as poor as many countries in Africa, but it still has incredible challenges. And understanding what type of community groups, what type of school groups can reach out to young women, give them hope, make sure they feel supported, make sure they're safe. That will be not only sort of a country thing, but specific to each community in the township, in the region, groups that step up to do that. We in our work, we can't do those local community things, but some of the things we do in terms of HIV prevention counseling do go to organizations like that and provide some small part of their support. So I think you're absolutely right about the challenge. We need not only things like an HIV vaccine, we need better social groups that draw people in and give them a sense of hope. The second issue about Africa working together, it's an extremely good point, whether you think about it in terms of the entire continent or you think about it regionally. In southern Africa, the idea, South Africa is the leader, where its economy is far more developed, and whether it's good governance or electricity or infrastructure, there's a lot that people expect on a regional basis. We're doing a lot in East Africa, we're doing a lot in West Africa, and because there are many small countries, it's when these countries come together and things. I mentioned the Ouagadougou Partnership, which is a West Africa group of countries coming together to make sure women have access to reproductive health tools. We have a lot of stuff in terms of government regulations, like approving medicines, where now the regional groups are stepping up, so there's not these huge delays in getting medicines out and available to Africa. In the area of agriculture, the African Union has decided to make that one of their priorities, and they have these, I mentioned the CADA plans, where countries review each other's plans and help each other move forward there. So there's certainly the construct of Africa helping itself is going to be increasingly important, and we're already seeing great things along those lines that we support. In terms of agriculture, Africa is mostly about small farms and small farmers, and our stuff is completely focused on small holders. They will absolutely be growing a lot of common crops. Maize is an amazing crop. There'll be a few dozen crops that, in terms of really high productivity, drought resistance, salinity resistance, dealing with heat, there won't be hundreds of crops that get improved. So it's not a monoculture, but there's no way can you move away from the idea that getting these amazing seeds for these few dozen crops out to poor farmers will be necessary. And inputs are necessary. It's fine to, there are practices where you don't till the soil as much and where you grow legumes and things like that. But if you want substantial productivity, the inputs, including things like fertilizer, are absolutely necessary. And so, we can't, you can't completely get away from how agriculture has been done successfully in other countries. There's not some new formula that's a non-common crop, non-fertilizer type approach. But anything that helps the smallholders is what we're all about.
Mr. Gates, thank you very much. I'm Desiree Thomas. I'm with CNBC Africa, and I'm with DJ School Breakfast Radio. You appeal to a lot of young people, and it sounds like you're very passionate about development of youth in the continent. How can we get all of the organizations that are currently doing work and empower those and collaborate with them across the African continent? I know you did say it's a mammoth task, but where are the small steps? Where are the immediate small steps that we can actually plug into as a continent?
Well, certainly with the empowerment of the digital revolution, the opportunity for youth to get together and decide what their common ideas are, either very much at the local community level or at the country level. There's an immense amount that can be done there. That type of social organization will not be the kind of thing a foundation sitting in the United States is the best expert at. We can help fund some of those things, like for women's groups. Women's self-help groups have proven to be a very powerful tool, particularly in rural areas. It's been done more in Asia so far than it's been done in Africa, but we've seen very good results when those groups come together, whether it's health practices, speaking up against female genital mutilation. In fact, that's the only tool really in the last decade that's made progress on that. And so the tools, the digital tools are there. And I do think youth will step up and take advantage of that. The entrepreneurs I'm meeting with, each of them have created communities around the work they're doing. But it's just at the very beginning, and it's up to them to take the leadership on these things.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Professor Nelson Mandela to say the final word to close the conference.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very brief formality, which is a tradition of the foundation since we started these lectures 14 years ago, which is as a token of appreciation to our speakers. We have presented a gift, and this particular one is the hunger for freedom. It's the story of the food and life of Nelson Mandela, and it was personally signed by him, and a few copies remain, and we thought that Mr. Bill Gates would truly love to have this one for himself. The second one, the chief executive Silvatang has already talked about it at the lecture, which is a contribution to the food security project that is already underway. This one's called the Great South African Cookbook, and we present this also to and lastly, thank you so much, Bill, for your very stimulating and challenging lecture. And thanks, Professor Delray, for hosting us once more at the University of Pretoria. And thank you very much to all of you.